I'm a little nervous, I'll be honest. I feel like something extraordinary is going on.
It's using an energy field, a type of
I said, be really careful now about maintaining the chain of custody on this. You've got the video of the guy actually going and picking it up. You know who that guy is. Find out from him who else has had this in their possession.
This will disturb you. You may not sleep tonight.
The University of Georgia was able to carbon date resin from the Buga Sphere, and it was dated at 12,560 years old.
The first thing everyone agrees on is this: whatever fell out of the sky in Colombia was not supposed to survive the landing. In March 2025, a farmer named Juan Velasco heard a sound that didn't fit anything he knew. It wasn't an explosion, it wasn't thunder. It was a deep, hollow impact, like the ground itself had been struck from above. When he reached the edge of his field, he didn't find a crater or burning debris. He found a perfectly smooth metal sphere sitting in the mud, intact, undamaged, and completely out of place. The object was about 12 inches wide, no seams, no bolts, no visible entry point, just a flawless metallic surface covered in strange symbols etched with microscopic precision. But the sphere wasn't the most disturbing part. The grass around it was dead. Everything within roughly 30 feet of the object had dried out completely, not burned, not scorched, just empty. Brittle blades, pale soil, lifeless earth. It looked like every molecule of water had been removed in an instant. Even the dirt crumbled like ash. Juan did what most people would do. He recorded it. That decision may be the only reason this story ever surfaced. Within hours, the video began spreading locally, and almost immediately after that, unmarked vehicles appeared. No news crews, no scientists with logos on their jackets, just quiet men asking very specific questions, not about what Juan saw, but about who touched the object. They kept repeating the same phrase: chain of custody. Who picked it up first? Who moved it? Who else had access? That isn't how authorities respond to a meteor. Normally, when something falls from space, researchers rush in. Samples are logged, announcements are made, papers get published. With this sphere, the opposite happened. Phones stopped ringing, emails went unanswered, and the farm was quietly labeled a restricted area. But the damage was already done. People watching the footage noticed something subtle and deeply unsettling. When Juan lifted the sphere, it didn't behave like metal. It didn't sink into the mud. It didn't pull downward the way a solid object should. It didn't float either. It just felt resistant, like gravity wasn't sure how to treat it. Juan described the weight as inconsistent, heavy but unstable, like lifting a box that kept changing what was inside. At first, no one took that seriously until the sphere was officially weighed. The numbers didn't stay the same. By the time the object was removed from the field, one thing was undeniable. This wasn't space junk, it wasn't experimental hardware, and it definitely wasn't natural, because nature doesn't land gently. Nature doesn't carve symbols with atomic precision, and nature doesn't drain life without heat or force. Whatever this thing was, it didn't crash, it arrived. And that realization created a much bigger problem, because once the sphere was secured, scientists tried to read the markings on its surface, and that's where everything stopped making sense. But that was only the first layer. The sphere was secured. The first instinct was obvious. That should have been the easy part. The markings were etched with impossible consistency, wrapping around the surface in precise bands. No smudges, no variation, no tool marks. Whatever carved them didn't slip, didn't hesitate, and didn't correct mistakes. It was flawless in a way human manufacturing never is. At first, experts were confident. We've decoded dead languages before: Sumerian, Mayan glyphs, linear scripts that hadn't been spoken in thousands of years. This should have been just another puzzle. It was. Linguists stared at the patterns for weeks and found nothing. No syntax, no repetition structure, no phonetic anchors. The symbols didn't behave like language at all. They weren't letters. They weren't numbers. They didn't even follow known symbolic logic. Every comparison failed. Ancient scripts came back empty. Modern coding languages showed zero overlap. Even abstract mathematical notation didn't line up. To human logic, the symbols were just noise. That's when one researcher at MIT proposed something that made everyone uncomfortable. Stop trying to read it like humans wrote it. Standard computers think in straight lines. They process one option, then the next, then the next. Fast, yes, but still chained to sequence. The sphere clearly wasn't. So the team made a radical decision. They fed the imagery into a quantum system, the Condor quantum processor, linked through Google's Sycamore cloud. This wasn't about translation anymore. It was about pattern recognition at a scale humans can't touch. Here's the difference. A normal computer is like a librarian, checking shelves one by one. A quantum computer doesn't check shelves. It becomes the entire library at the same time. It explores billions of possibilities simultaneously, collapsing only when something meaningful appears. When the sphere's markings were uploaded, the AI didn't try to translate them. It tried to solve them. For 72 hours, the system ran non-stop. No breaks, no human intervention. Just raw probability, tearing through geometry, spacing, depth, and ratio. Then, at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday, the system flagged a hit. Not a word, not a sentence, a number. And that single result changed the direction of the entire investigation, because the symbols weren't trying to say something. They were defining something, and what they defined shouldn't have been there at all. That's when the math appeared. The first match the quantum system flagged wasn't a word or a symbol. It was a constant. The outer band of markings on the sphere aligned perfectly with Planck's constant, the number that defines the smallest possible unit of energy in the universe. This isn't an approximation. This isn't close enough. It was precise to 15 decimal places. That level of accuracy is beyond our best instruments. To put that in perspective, we can't even measure Planck's constant that cleanly with modern equipment, and yet there it was, carved into a metallic surface sitting in a muddy field in Colombia. That should have been impossible. Then the AI found the second sequence. It matched the fine structure constant, the number that controls how strongly atoms bind together. Change this value even slightly and the universe breaks. Matter wouldn't form. Stars wouldn't ignite. Life would never exist. And somehow, that number was etched into the sphere too. At that moment, the tone in the room changed. This wasn't the greeting. This wasn't the message saying hello. This was a demonstration. It was like handing a caveman a smartphone with the chemical formula for fire engraved on the screen. Whoever made this object wasn't just inside the universe. They understood the underlying math that makes the universe work. But the system wasn't finished. As the quantum analysis dug deeper, it found another layer hidden in the spacing between the symbols themselves. The distances weren't random. They followed the golden ratio, the mathematical fingerprint of nature. You see it in hurricane spirals, in galaxies, in the structure of DNA. The sphere didn't just contain the golden ratio, it used it as a framework. This wasn't flat information, it was fractal. The closer the AI examined the geometry, the more data emerged. Information embedded inside information, layered in depth and proportion instead of lines and code. Humans write code in sequences. This thing wrote code in geometry. The realization hit hard. The data density alone was beyond anything we can manufacture. The level of compression was theoretically impossible with human technology. This wasn't just advanced engineering, it was elegant, and it confirmed what many of the researchers had been afraid to say out loud. The sphere wasn't natural, it wasn't accidental, it was manufactured with intent. But the math revealed something else, something even more disturbing. The symbols weren't just describing the universe, they were instructing something inside the sphere on how to interact with it. And when the AI modeled what those instructions would actually do, that's when gravity entered the conversation, and nothing was normal after that. X-ray scans of the sphere had already revealed something unusual. It wasn't solid. Inside the outer shell were 3 perfectly nested layers, floating inside one another with impossible precision. No visible supports, no connectors, just concentric shells suspended in place, like they were ignoring the rules of physics. At first, scientists assumed the layers were protected, shielding for something delicate inside. That theory didn't survive long. When the quantum AI applied the mathematical constants from the surface markings to a simulation of the internal structure, the results were disturbing. Those shells weren't passive, they were active components. The model showed that if the shells were aligned and resonated according to the ratios carved into the surface, they would generate a very specific type of field. Not a magnetic field, not an electrical one, a null field. This field doesn't block magnetism, it cancels it. And when magnetism disappears, gravity doesn't behave the way it's supposed to. The simulation suggested the sphere was designed to interfere directly with gravitational coupling. In simple terms, it could negate gravity, not by pushing against it, but by switching off part of the mechanism that makes mass fall in the first place. That's when an older theory resurfaced, one most physicists had quietly abandoned: zero-point energy. Even in empty space, energy exists, a background hum of quantum activity called the zero-point field. It's everywhere, it's constant, and in theory, if you could interact with it, you could extract energy without fuel. The quantum breakdown suggested the sphere was doing exactly that. It wasn't generating power, it was tapping into the vacuum itself. Suddenly, the strange reports from the crash foresight made sense. The sphere didn't burn the grass because it wasn't releasing heat. It created a localized field that disrupted molecular bonds. Water didn't evaporate. It was rejected. Every cell around the object had its ability to hold H2O switched off. The grass didn't die slowly. It was dehydrated instantly, as if the force holding water molecules in place had simply been removed. This wasn't destruction, it was control. At that point, the labs went quiet. Normally, discoveries like this produce a flood of papers, conferences, and leaked discussions. With the sphere, communication stopped. Researchers stopped responding. Data access vanished, not because of national security, because of something called ontological security. The information wasn't dangerous because it could be weaponized. It was dangerous because it threatened our understanding of what reality actually is. The quantum AI had cracked the first functional layer of the sphere, and the conclusion was terrifying. Our physics wasn't wrong. It was incomplete. What we had been calling the laws of the universe were just a rough draft, and the final version was carved into a metal sphere that was still running. Because the code wasn't dormant, the sphere was active, and the next layer of the system wasn't visual at all. It was something we weren't even supposed to hear. The next layer of the code wasn't something you could see, it was something you could hear. After the quantum system mapped the mathematical constants and gravitational models, it started flagging anomalies that didn't fit visual data at all. These weren't shapes or ratios, they were oscillations, repeating wave patterns buried in the spacing between symbols. At first, the researchers thought it was noise. Then someone made a simple decision that changed everything. What if the gaps weren't empty? What if they were intervals? When the AI converted those geometric separations into waveforms, the lab went silent. The resulting signal wasn't random. It was structured, clean, precise, and instantly recognizable. It matched the frequency profile recorded by LIGO in 2015, the moment humanity heard gravitational waves for the first time. The sound of two black holes colliding over 1 billion light years away, a chirp in the fabric of space-time itself. We needed a $4 billion facility, lasers stretching down 4-mile tunnels, and years of calibration just to hear that sound once. The sphere had etched into its casing like a playlist. That realization was unsettling enough. But then the field reports started lining up. The Colombian farmer's daughter had mentioned a humming sound before the object was taken away. She said it sounded like bees trapped in a jar. At the time, no one paid attention. Now they did. Researchers isolated the background audio from a shaky cell phone video taken at the scene. Buried under wind and voices was a continuous tone, 432 hertz. Musicians have argued about this frequency for decades. Some call it the cosmic pitch, claiming it aligns with natural vibrations found in the universe. Scientists usually dismiss those claims as pseudoscience. They didn't laugh this time. The sphere was broadcasting that tone continuously. The quantum simulation revealed why. The 3 nested shells inside the object weren't fixed. They were suspended in a magnetic resonance system, forming a chamber that behaved like a tuning fork. When vibrated at specific frequencies, the shells didn't amplify sound through air. They amplified it through space. At that resonance, the sphere didn't just affect pressure waves, it affected gravity itself. The MIT models showed that fully powered, the object would act as a metamaterial cloak, a structure capable of bending light around itself. Invisibility. Defense agencies had been trying to solve that problem for years. The sphere didn't brute force it. It sidestepped it. It used sound to bend light. That's when researchers realized something even stranger. The component at the center of the sphere wasn't a processor. It wasn't silicone. It wasn't running code. It was a crystalline resonator. It didn't compute with ones and zeros. It computed with vibration. The sphere wasn't a machine in the way we understand machines. It was an instrument, and it was still playing, which made the next discovery absolutely terrifying, because when they placed the sphere on a scale, it didn't weigh the same twice. The first official measurement put the sphere at 16 pounds. Nothing unusual about that. The number was logged, photographed, and verified. Solid object, fixed mass. Except it didn't stay fixed. A few days later, during a routine check, the same sphere weighed 22 pounds. No components had been added. Nothing was attached. The casing hadn't been altered. It was the exact same object. Then it dropped again, 20 pounds. Then slightly less, then slightly more. Mass isn't supposed to behave like that. Weight can change if gravity changes, but mass is fundamental. You don't gain it unless you add atoms, and no atoms were being added. Unless the sphere was interacting with something we don't normally think of as matter. The quantum AI flagged the possibility that made physicists uneasy. Interaction with the Higgs field, the invisible field that gives particles their mass. If the resonance frequencies inside the sphere were were strong enough, they could be nudging how much mass the object temporarily had. In simple terms, the sphere wasn't getting heavier. It was deciding how heavy it wanted to be. The simulations went further. They suggested the resonance system was pulling energy from the quantum vacuum, the same zero-point field implicated in the gravity anomalies. Virtual particles pop in and out of existence in empty space all the time. The sphere appeared to be harvesting that background noise. It wasn't powered by a battery. It was feeding on reality. That explained the earlier dehydration field too. At certain dissonant frequencies, the resonance pushed specific molecular bonds away. Water molecules were repelled, not destroyed. Heat wasn't involved. Combustion never occurred. It was selective rejection. The microspheres discovered floating between the nested shells suddenly made sense. 9 tiny metallic orbs moving in perfect synchronization, stabilizing the resonance like planets orbiting a star. Without them, the system would tear itself apart. Inside the sphere was a miniature solar system, locked in constant motion. The most unsettling part? No one knew how to shut it down. The sphere wasn't dormant. It was humming, adjusting, reacting. It was placed inside a lead-lined containment box in a facility that doesn't officially exist, and even there, the resonance never stopped completely. The quantum AI picked up one final detail that sent a chill through the team. The resonance patterns weren't random. They were waiting for a specific input, a specific signal, something external. And according to the code etched on the surface, that signal wasn't coming from Earth because the symbols weren't just physics. They were coordinates.
The breakthrough didn't come from a physicist. It came from an astronomer who stopped treating the symbols like equations and started treating them like positions. Dr. Lisa Park at Harvard took the quantum output and overlaid the sphere's geometric patterns onto a three-dimensional map of the known universe. At first, nothing lined up. Then she adjusted the scale. That's when it clicked. The markings on the third shell matched the locations of pulsars. Pulsars are rapidly spinning neutron stars that emit perfectly timed bursts of radiation. They're so consistent that astronomers use them as cosmic clocks. If you want to navigate deep space, you don't use planets or stars. You use pulsars. Humanity already knew this. In the 1970s, we used pulsars on the Voyager probe to create a map showing where Earth is, in case someone found it. The sphere was using the same idea, but backwards. This wasn't a map pointing to Earth. It was a map pointing from somewhere else. When the quantum AI traced the triangulation lines, they converged on a region between the Andromeda and Triangulum galaxies, a massive dark patch of space. No visible stars, no radiation signatures, nothing detectable by Hubble or the James Webb Space Telescope. On our instruments, it was empty. According to the sphere, it wasn't. The coordinates were too precise to be accidental. The AI proposed something that sounded like science fiction, but fit the data perfectly. A Type 2 civilization, a society capable of building megastructures around stars, harvesting their entire energy output, a Dyson-scale system. If a civilization like that existed, it wouldn't glow, it wouldn't shine, it would look like a void, because every photon of usable energy would be captured before escaping, invisible by design. The implications were immediate. This wasn't debris. It wasn't a probe that lost its way. It was a node. Further analysis revealed 3 additional coordinate clusters etched into the sphere. One matched the source of a fast radio burst detected in 2022. Another aligned with a gravity anomaly near Kepler 186f. The third cluster pointed somewhere much closer, the solar system. Trajectory modeling confirmed what many had suspected. The sphere didn't slam into Earth at cosmic speed. It decelerated a lot. It hit at terminal velocity, like an object that had been deliberately released, not flung through space. It wasn't an accident. It was a delivery. And that's when rumors started surfacing about a second sphere, smaller, about 8 inches wide, sitting quietly in a private collection in Tokyo. No crash, no announcement, just ownership changing hands behind closed doors. If that was true, the implications were staggering. These spheres weren't isolated. They were part of a network. How many more were buried under Antarctic ice? How many were resting at the bottom of the ocean, still humming, still listening? The quantum AI found one last pattern in the pulsar data, a temporal alignment. The star positions etched into the sphere didn't match the Earth's night sky today. They matched Earth's night sky from 12,000 years ago, the end of the last ice age. Either this object had been here before, or it had been waiting for us to reach the point where we could finally understand it. And now that we had, the only question left was why. Because whatever sent this wasn't just mapping space, it was timing us.
At some point, the science stops being the scary part. The implications take over. If the simulations are even close to accurate, the sphere isn't just an object. It's a power source. Not chemical, not nuclear. A direct tap into zero-point energy, the background hum of the universe itself. One 12-inch sphere could theoretically output enough energy to power a city the size of New York indefinitely. No fuel, no waste, no shutdown. Free energy. That single breakthrough would collapse industries overnight. Oil becomes irrelevant. Power grids become obsolete. Entire economies rewrite themselves. But energy is just the beginning. Remember the dehydrated grass? The AI model suggests the field can be tuned, push water away, or pull it apart selectively. That means cancer cells, viruses, diseased tissue. In theory, you could vibrate a tumor out of existence without cutting the skin. No surgery, no chemo, just frequency. Whoever built this doesn't use scalpels, they use resonance. And that's where the fear sets in, because the same technology that heals can destroy. Tune the field to the resonance of tectonic plates and you don't get medicine, you get earthquakes. Tune it to the frequency of the human heart and you don't get peace. You get the quietest weapon ever imagined. The military knows this. That's why the data vanished. That's why the farm is sealed. That's why the sphere is locked away instead of studied openly. This isn't science fiction. This is Type 2 civilization technology sitting in human hands. And we don't even know how to turn it off. Biological scans from the crash site revealed something chilling. The bacteria in the soil weren't burned or crushed. Their DNA bonds had simply come undone. The code that holds life together was unzipped. That looks a lot like a defense system. Tamper the wrong way, and the environment around it stops cooperating with biology altogether. We're not handling a gift. We're handling a loaded system. So what is it really? A weapon? Possibly. A power source? Almost certainly. A message? Without question. One theory keeps resurfacing among researchers late at night when the simulations finish running: the cosmic IQ test. The idea is simple. Advanced civilizations don't introduce themselves with words. They leave puzzles. If you're too primitive, the object does nothing. If you're advanced enough to crack the code, you unlock the next stage. We just did. Quantum AI solved the riddle. The system woke up, and now the signal path is open. That dark patch of space between galaxies isn't empty. It's listening, and the sphere is responding. This might be the moment humanity officially stops being alone, and that changes everything. Religion, politics, economics, and how we see ourselves in the universe. So here's the real question. Is the Buga Sphere a gift meant to lift us into a new era, or is it a Trojan horse waiting for us to invite it in? And if one of these spheres landed in your backyard, would you call the authorities, or would you lean in and listen to the hum? If you want more stories like this, make sure you subscribe and tell me what you think in the comments below, because whatever this thing is, it didn't come here by accident.